On the engineering side, like you're 2 or 3, maybe 4 employees at this point, yet you're working with the biggest customers in the world. How are you doing that?
The world of 40 engineers working on the same problem is over. I think small and nimble teams really rule because you have every person going very deep. All of your engineers are actually just building. And we could give you all these different data points from the outside. There's so many factors that you could look at, and it's much better at pinpointing those exact places where you could have increased efficiency.
What are some visions of the future that excite you the most? Are there things you're talking about from a product development standpoint?
There's now a bunch of modular data centers that are running on stranded compute. And in the past, that could only be done really for mining. But now you could actually run inference workloads on basically wasted energy, where you deploy smaller amounts of energy across many different regions. We can power so many different types of data center models because the core of what we do is data collection. The easier part is training the model. The harder part is collecting all of the data that you need in order to train the model. Because we've focused ourselves as a data collection company, we can power every type of data center that will be entering the market.
Margarita, welcome to Under the Banyan Tree. I'm Sam Arabi, founder of Banyan Ventures, and I'm really excited to have you here today. We're in San Francisco, your home turf.
Yeah, I live like 5 minutes from here. Thank you so much for having me. This is so perfect.
Love it. Did you walk here or Uber?
Well, no, I still drove. But
Okay, drove. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm used to being in New York, so there's
No
not a
one
lot
drives,
of
yeah.
like not a lot of drive. City bikes though.
Yeah.
Less biking here these days. Like it seems like.
Have you taken a Waymo yet?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Oh, you have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to do that today. Now that you bring that up.
Yeah. Do you have the app yet? I can,
No.
Or I could call one for you. That's
Yeah. Okay. We could. I might take you up on that. So this podcast is really focusing on telling your story and learning about you and what you're building. For the readers and listeners' context, Banyan invested in your seed round. We're really excited about that. You're building data center management software for the modern age. You're leveraging AI to essentially build a Copilot that detects vulnerabilities and keeps data centers compliant, reduces the actual power bill of the data center, and brings all of the modern functionality of software and AI to the forefront of data center operations and management. But would love to hear a quick introduction to you and a quick pitch on Aravolta, and then we can just jump right in.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I'm Margarita and I started Aravolta about a year ago. The reason we started the company is data center operations have basically remained pretty stagnant for the last 15, 20 years since we started building and scaling out data centers for just traditional compute purposes. And as we're scaling out and building out so many new data centers at a scale we haven't seen before for AI data centers, we really need to update the way we do operations and management of the data centers so that we're as energy efficient as possible, as efficient labor-wise as possible, and we don't have any interruptions or downtime across our really, really expensive data center assets. Just because this is the workloads that are training AI, we can't really afford 20% downtimes or some of these crazy figures we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. We have 6 or 7 investments in physical AI infrastructure products at Banyan. With my AI fund, and when I first saw what you were building, you and Jack, I think it was like back in January, I emailed you, and I think I didn't hear for a while, but I kept following your updates because I firmly believed that the future of data center management needed to be upgraded. And I had looked at the other tooling in the space, and you're talking about like competitors that are 20 years old. And, I know your background, you have some experience working at Microsoft and on really large deployments there, supercomputer deployments. But how did you get the intuition to say, hey, Jack, let's jump ship and go to Y Combinator and start a data center management software? I mean, that like, it's not even a space where I'm seeing, 10 other competitors necessarily. I'm sure they'll be coming when they see your success. But how did you get that insight to jump into the space and then, bring AI along with you for managing the data center? Would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, at first when we were ideating and just running the idea past some people, a lot of people told us that basically these people, the industry is older, everyone has been running things a certain way for the last 15, 20 years. They wouldn't really use new tooling and it's kind of all embedded. So what we did is before we had a product or really knew anything, we went to some data center conferences and just talked to a ton of people and just got an idea of what are they doing for their operations, what does it look like right now, and like 98% of people that we talked to were deeply unhappy with their existing software systems. And a good amount of people were looking for new systems as well, but there were limited market options, or at least limited market options that were modern, usable, and actually fast to deploy. So I think that was a big thing, just starting with the people we talked to at a couple of the initial conferences. One of them was like the AI Infra in San Francisco. Then we started building a product pretty quickly. I think it transitioned because I had built an internal, just like a simple tool dashboard within Microsoft that was used by a couple teams for just managing data center deployments, especially new tech deployments. And it was just to kind of streamline all of our data points into one simple view to actually make sense of things. But I had wanted to build something much bigger and much more for the whole data center operational front for a long time, internal to Microsoft. That would have been pretty difficult to do, just because it would have taken so much coordination. I would have to ask so many higher ups, and it would have taken 5 to 10 years probably, and it would have turned into a completely different project. So realizing and talking to so many others, we realized we could build this full tool for external and all these other data centers.
Wow. I mean, there's so much I could say on that, but things that jump out to me is like Y Combinator talks about build something people want. And so if you're hearing 95% of the conversation saying we need this and we're open to actually evaluating new options, but there aren't any, there can't be a better sign to start a company. And, I've worked with so many different software and infrastructure startups, and, that's something that I've seen not go the right way is you build something that maybe people want, but the organization and the market just isn't ready to actually adopt it. And usually what it looks like is deals lacking urgency. So
Exactly.
you're pitching this product and it's like, yeah, this is cool. I like it. But, it's not like a top priority. It's not a need. Whereas what you're building, when I met you and saw your pipeline and the customers you were talking to, I mean, these are the most advanced, sophisticated, cutting edge, and largest data centers and compute providers in the world. And it's pretty insane. Like even at Microsoft, they didn't have a solution internally for you as a data center kind of management operations person to use. So you're just like, hey, I'll just build it myself. So I guess on that journey, what have been some of the challenges you didn't know about that you wish you knew now, either from like a sales point of view or a product management point of view? Would just be curious, like, have you seen anything so far? You're like, oh, wow, that's like insanely hard, but you're cracking the code on it, or just would love to hear from you because this is such like a new and fascinating space on how you're approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously the first company I've built, and honestly, everything's a challenge. I'm going to be honest. When you're building a company, you're kind of caressing and cajoling something from nothing and non existence into making it real in the world and kind of making the world know about it. And when no one knows your name, you're trying to get so many meetings and kind of build up this pipeline from nothing. And so I think I think there's been a lot of challenges that are kind of on the engineering front. How do we incorporate hundreds of different device types? Luckily, our engineering team is has been one of the only teams that I think could really tackle this problem. You have to go very deep into low-level hardware. And then outside of the engineering front, how do we build our sales pipeline? We tried different things like how do we get people to actually know about us? It turned out conferences were kind of the best approach in person and talking to real human beings. So I think it was just sort of figuring things out as we go and trying a bunch of things. And, a lot of things didn't work that we tried. But I think once you find the thing that works, you just kind of iterate on it and do it again and again and again.
Love that. With the two questions I have, like the lower level integrations, because I'm just like thinking about it. You go into a data center, there's different regions, different constraints of that data center. There's different types of hardware. NVIDIA has multiple generations of GPUs, and then there's other compute providers, some of which we've invested in: Positron, Recognize, SpinCloud. All three are inference providers. All three are rapidly scaling their offerings. Like Positron just announced their $51 million Series A yesterday. Shout out to Mitesh and team. But the point I'm getting at is like, it's not all the same. A software usually accounts for X amount of variables and then you add over time. Whereas here, these are like hardware-based dependencies and it's a software product. And we're going to get to this too. And you're adding AI into it and helping the data center. But on the engineering side, like how do you actually account for all that? And, I think you're 2 or 3, maybe 4 employees at this point. So yet you're working with the biggest customers in the world. So how are you like doing that? I mean, it just blows my mind personally, and I would just love to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you just need some of the top-notch engineers who put every effort into solving very hard problems. This isn't like you could vibe code, together a nice front end. You actually have to connect to, like we had customers with custom chips and customers with very non-standard data center deployments, and you basically have to go in and find a way to integrate these devices from the actual UPS to the transformers and the busways and the tap boxes and all these new device types. So it's not just the servers and the switches and the PDs. And so in order to do that, we have to go really low level and connect to those devices. Honestly, we didn't know how to do that 2-3 years ago, but basically we've built up our own middleware layer. It makes it much easier to integrate devices much faster. The reason why a lot of DSIMs and other deployments of data center software have failed in the past, and even BMS systems or building management systems don't do this, is because there's so many vendor types, and it's very hard to be vendor agnostic because every vendor has their own kind of language by which you can communicate to the device. So our middleware is basically what we started with. We started with how do we actually integrate all these different device types. And that was kind of the main technical challenge that we've kind of built up a way to really, really quickly integrate very many different languages or ways of interacting with those devices.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, that with my limited but somewhat knowledgeable understanding, it makes sense. It sounds like it's a combination of engineering horsepower, an extreme focus on details, and then just finding a way to build out this middle layer that can be flexible enough to not be constrained by the customer requirements, and then constant adaptation to be able to service that customer. And the way I kind of understand it is, a human can only work X amount of hours a day. They might be tired. Their kid might have kept them up all night, or their puppy. And so people, we're people. We're not perfect. Whereas AI, I'm not saying AI is perfect, but AI is a hustler. AI is always working just like 24/7. And my understanding is like, hey, you've somehow built an AI Copilot that runs on top of all the different real-time data sets that are being produced from the data center, and you're finding these extremely tangible suggestions. And I'd love to learn, one, how did you build that? Like, tell us more about that. And two, are we going to be in a world where it's like AGI for the data center and you're making real-time adjustments at Aravolta without even needing the customer's permission? Or what's the frontier going to look like in the future? And where are we at today? And how do you even do that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things there that I want to touch on. I think I want to first step back into your last question, which is how do we do it with such a small team?
Right.
I think one of the big things that I believe in is the world of 20, 40 engineers working on the same problem is kind of over. I think small and nimble teams really rule because you could have every person going very deep into their ownership area and building something incredible. You're not spending all of your time coordinating between your engineers. All of your engineers are actually just building all the time. So that's one big thing. The next, in terms of the AI component and how do we actually train a model to make these data centers more efficient? So there's been a couple of approaches, and I think there have been companies in the past that have tried to build so-called autonomous data centers. I think AI is really good at this specific thing, which is, can we hold thousands of data points that in our head all at once? A human isn't really good at that. We can maybe think about like 7 numbers and memorize that
I'm like
at a
at
time.
2 or 3.
Exactly.
So,
And kind of make a decision based on those data points. We could hold some things in our head. AI is much better at holding so many different inputs and saying, okay, based on X, Y, Z, and way more variables, what is the best option here? And so, for example, we could make a bunch of recommendations in our data model and say, okay, we have like this system, and these are how everything is interacting. This is the model of the data center that we could show you and tell you, and we could give you all these different data points. This is how much energy this equipment is using. This is how much energy this other point of equipment is using. And now it's holding hundreds of these data points, and it's saying, okay, am I being inefficient? Where am I losing actually some power? Maybe between going from the transformer to the UPS to the busways. Where can I gain energy? And it could even be in like the fan speed settings, the actual way the cooling is running, and when to run it during the daytime, and when do you have natural cooling just from the outside. There's so many factors that you could look at, and it's much better at pinpointing those exact places where you could have increased efficiency.
makes sense. We at Banyan, and I'm a solo GP, so I say this we thing, but I'm running the fund, and the thesis is all around AI native technology being the dominant force of our lifetime that will create more value than web, mobile, even compute combined. And we're talking about at least a 75% increase in each person's productivity in the coming years. And I think that could be on the low end. And so now we're looking at the data center space here and applying AI. And that is a theme I see, is where there's a lot of structured, repeatable inputs into the AI. You can get structured, repeatable, high quality outputs. And so you've put that together. And I'm curious, when you and Jack, your co-founder and CTO, are just, having a beer or ideating after work, what are some visions of the future that excite you the most? Like, where could this go on the data center space, applying this AI native angle on top of the structured sort of outputs from each data center? Like, are there things you're talking about or really excited about from a product development standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we're excited about. On one hand, I'm excited about all the new data center type of models that are coming out. And by models, I mean, there's now a bunch of modular data centers that are running on stranded compute. And in the past, that could only be done really for mining or these other data center purposes. But now you could actually run inference workloads on basically wasted energy. And there's now a hive model of data centers where you deploy smaller amounts of energy or compute across many different regions, and you use less energy. And so we can power so many different types of data center models because the core of what we do is data collection. The honestly easier part is training the model. The harder part is collecting all of the data that you need in order to train the model. And it's pretty difficult to do that because, like I mentioned before, you have so many different equipment types and so many different vendors. And so because we've focused ourselves as a data collection company in some ways across every single data center type, we can power every type of data center that will be entering the market. And I've met, I think at this point, like tens of new data centers that are coming up, people who are building a 50 megawatt development, people who are doing like 10 sites of 5 megawatts, people who are doing immersion cooling, people who are doing liquid cooling, and all these new innovative ways to make data centers. And I think we're really, really excited to be the company that makes all of that possible. Like, these data centers wouldn't be operating without their operational software. And so there's all these different data center models, and we're just more excited to be able to, help them be alive. Like, the
Right.
hardest part is the operations for these data centers. And now they could just say, oh, that's covered. Like we already have Aravolta.
Yeah, I mean, and just to give the listeners context, one of our investments is Ori GPU Cloud. We were, or we being, I was like one of the first, I believe, 5 investors after they transitioned into the GPU cloud space. And they were one of the earlier GPU clouds based out of the UK. And they had a really incredible team. Like the initial team and investors, even like Lee Fixie was an early investor in the original Ori Vision, like a distributed cloud computing platform. So they had an expert team on Kubernetes from the jump. And then when they went in the GPU space, they were full stack and they support multiple very high profile clients, both in the Middle East and the US. I won't share any names without their permission, but they're behind some of the most well-known and high-scale kind of providers of compute out there, and they're full stack. So in Ori's business, they are responsible for what could go wrong. Like if there's an outage of power, they're on the hook to provide their end user, whoever's paying them for this hardware, these GPU kind of equipment. They're responsible to give them a refund, and so they call it an SLA, a service level agreement. Yeah. It's massive dollars. I mean, for them, a small deployment's $30-40 million. Like that's like a small, and that's paid back to the debt provider on their business, usually on like a 2 to 3 year clip, and then they own the hardware for 7 to 8 years, similar to the CoreWeave business model. And so I just for listeners, like what is at stake here with this space is it's mission critical. For every minute of downtime, it could translate into $200,000 or $300,000 in losses. And then there's other downstream effects because now that customer, which is all built on trust, might not have the right a level of compute. So if your end customer is a bank, they don't have compute. Now their customers can't use their banking. So I completely agree. Like this is helping them stay alive and handle everything.
Default alive is
right.
how I like to put it.
Yeah, I love it. I think like one of the things too is like right off the bat when you deploy your software, it's like a 2 to 5% power savings.
Yeah, that's what we've seen just from initial deployments and then estimating what were the gains that we saw immediately just from actually implementing the recommendations.
Wow. Any other like big proof points you're seeing in the market today when you like the before and after? I love that framework of before our software was here and then after. Like, are you seeing any other big before and afters that you're really proud of?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing is just uptime. Like I said, so data centers will show, 99.9999% uptime if they have to be,
that
tier
SLA
3.
agreement, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's a requirement. But
Yes.
the way they can actually do that is when a server goes down or a port goes down or another issue happens, they just move the workload to something that's actually working.
Right.
It's not like
they eat the cost.
Exactly.
And behind the scenes, that has a massive downside to you as the GPU provider.
Exactly. So that's very painful and expensive because if you have 20% of your hardware down, you need 20% more hardware to run the same amount of workload. And so that's like I said, expensive.
And just for context for listeners, just to finance that, depending on your operation, that could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars in spare compute you just have lying around for this 99.99% sort of guarantee you're giving your end user.
Yeah, spare compute, spare parts, all of that is a huge component. And so we like to say that you're going to see 15% more uptime or actually much, much more increases in getting the availability much high. And then another component is a lot of these customers, at a certain scale, they're just running the GPUs to like basically have 6-month lifetimes or 1-year lifetimes. That we saw that with a big customer that were just running their GPUs at like 90% capacity for training workloads. And then, after a year, you just have so many issues and problems with the GPU that it's just basically you need to buy a new set, even though they should have much, much longer uptimes or lifespans if you're running them at, 60%, 50% capacities. And because you're having so many spikes on the GPUs over time, it just wears it down. And so because of that, we can say, how do we actually prevent those type of things? How do we prevent spikes in different issues? So it's all on the operational software front and making those optimizations.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this too. Because when my AI Fund One is constantly looking at new opportunities and infrastructure that's AI native. So it's essentially improving the efficiency of X problem, whether it's inference or cooling or many different areas. So kind of from your experience though, we've traditionally seen a GPU supposed to last 7 or 8 years. This is actually the first time I've heard someone saying, hey, actually, we're seeing it last a year. That's a huge issue.
Yeah.
So like taking a step back, one of the LPs in my fund, a friend of mine, he runs a really large debt financing service. I think you've met him. We won't say his name out of respect for him. But they're in like the $1 billion range of financing per year. And, so they're loaning out $1 billion a year so companies can buy GPUs. They take the risk. If it all goes to shit, then they have to take over the hardware and resell it.
Yeah.
Really interesting business. But that would keep him up at night. If he knew any of his people that he was financing were only going to get 1 year out of that equipment, I mean, that's an automatic, let's not work with that customer.
Yeah.
Because you need this thing to be in service a long time. It's like buying a brand new car and then hitting it on the curb and smashing a wall and buying a new one in a year. It's really ineffective. So tell us more about that. Are you really seeing that?
So this was a specific case. And the reason is when you're spiking the load so much and the GPU is just running really hot and running into issues consistently. So you spike the workload, it runs hot, and then you stop again. And that's pretty common for training workloads. It'll go dark for, a couple days and then suddenly again it spikes. If you're doing that for, a year on end, that life cycle or lifespan of the GPU is going to be not great. They're meant to be running at small consistencies at around 40% capacity at consistent energy levels. And that's kind of how you increase that lifespan and make sure everything's going to work properly long term. But like I said, if you're running large training workloads, a lot of the time you kind of have a lot of maintenance issues on those servers and GPUs.
Do you think in a world where, because we're still early days in AI, but as more workloads come online and specific inference workloads, and like probably the most clear example was when OpenAI released one of their prior models. They had something like an insane number, like millions of signups per 10-minute intervals, and I'd imagine their compute. I mean, he said Sam Altman said our GPUs are melting. And they were only constrained by GPU availability to drive new user growth. Do you see a world where that continues to sort of degrade the lifetime of the GPU, or do you think it's mostly going to stay in the training realm?
I mean, it could be for the inference realm, especially if you just don't have enough capacity, then you're really just spiking the capacity on what you have, and then you're kind of running into the same issue. It just depends on how much you have and then how much demand you have. And I think as, NVIDIA and every new chip comes out, suddenly the demand spikes for that specific compute level and the supply still hasn't caught up. And so you see initial problems with that specific GPU, and that's a pretty common scenario until suddenly the demand fits the supply of the chip, and now you have enough, and now you're running at 40% availability of the or 40% workloads, and so I think it's going to be a continuous problem, and that's just kind of the cycle of chip deployments or how they've worked so far in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shifting gears, I'd love to go on a more personal note. So you're a Y Combinator founder, you're a female founder, you're in an extremely complex space in terms of complexity of software, complexity of cell cycles. When did you know you would be a CEO? Like when in your journey, I've kind of noticed like founders, they kind of had this aha moment maybe when they were kids or at some point where they're like, hey, I know I want to jump into things. And you jumped into a space where I'd argue it's male dominated, and you're doing it. And for listeners' context, I've worked with dozens of CEOs over my career, and it's hard to find someone more resourceful than you and diligent and just a doer. No talking. Just when we made that investment into Aravolta, immediately you were tapping my network. You were looking for any sort of feedback on the sales process that you could find, and just trying to bring the company to the next level with such high urgency. And that's rare in a founder. I mean, that to me is what makes like a compounding difference over time. But I would love to just learn more about your background, from childhood till now, and just learn from you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I think I knew I was going to start my own company when I was pretty young. I didn't really have the idea. I didn't know what like CEO was or kind of like what a startup was, but I just had an idea that eventually I would want to run my own team, and kind of I pictured this beautiful scenario of how my life would be. But I think so there was a couple of things from my childhood that I think made a big difference. One, my parents immigrated to the U.S. right before I was born. So my dad from Ukraine in Odessa, and then my mom from St. Petersburg. And one of the biggest things they always would tell me and teach me was extreme gratefulness and extreme can-do. They also happened to be Jewish, and their family had gone through so much during World War II. And so one huge component was like they always said that I always felt so privileged to have everything I did in life, even though, we lived in a nice town and it was a great spot in New Jersey. It was just like the idea that I had the world kind of at my fingertips, and that's something they taught me. And I think a big part of my childhood was letting me be really free, maybe a little bit too free. Like I started walking to school when I was maybe like 7 or younger, and just like I would walk around barefoot, and I was just kind of a wild child. But they really taught me that if I did whatever I wanted and made my own achievements, then I would kind of see the rewards from that. And they never kind of overpraised anything I did. It was all based on my own achievements. And so I kind of grew up with this feeling of, yeah, like you can just do that, or I could just try to do this and like see what happens, and kind of making my own decisions. So I think I just never had that fear. In some ways, I always thought things would eventually work out if I tried hard enough. And I always took the approach of what is the worst case scenario? Like, what's the worst case scenario if I quit my job and the startup fails after 2 months? Okay, I'll like get a new job. I'll figure it out. It's fine. And I always kind of take that approach when I think of something really challenging I have to do in order to make my startup work. And so yeah, even just being what you said about a woman in this space, it's like, I think I think it's been an advantage in a lot of ways, just because you're able to stand out really fast. Even in like conferences and booths, you're like one of the only ones in like a sea of people. And it actually in some ways is helpful. And so I always I'm kind of a glass half full type of person. And I always just think like, what's the worst case scenario? And so just go ahead and do things. I think maybe it's a good trait, maybe it's a bad trait, but that's kind of how I've been for a long time.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's an excellent trait, and looking at what you can do versus anything in your way, and then giving yourself that sort of relief of if it all doesn't work out or doesn't go as planned, worst case scenario, will be okay. And I didn't know you're Jewish for one, or come from a Jewish heritage. I didn't know your parents were immigrants. My dad's actually from Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, he grew up sort of poor, and Saida is where he's from. Many, many brothers and sisters. And, he just sort of scrapped his way along in school and did really well. And the Civil War broke out, and he had the opportunity to work abroad and then eventually apply to colleges in the U.S. He's the only family member to make it to the U.S. So the Arabi name, I don't think there's any other Arabis in the U.S. And basically bringing all this up because it's like similar to you, he'd always emphasize, and my mom, just independent thinking. Think for yourself, own your decisions, and like it's all good. Just have confidence that if things don't work out, it will be okay. I'm curious, what did your parents do? Like, did they work in technology at all, or where did you kind of get involved in computer science, and how did that journey go for you?
Yeah, I mean, so my dad actually, he didn't like speak English when he came, so he started out doing these like base electrician jobs for a
Nice.
while. But then eventually he made his way up and then became a software engineer at Bear Stearns and then worked in
Wow.
like banking and
Smart
hedge
guy.
funds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so eventually he learned,
Right.
English somewhat and then kind of grew from that. Then from banking and hedge fund software engineering, he moved to like government contracts and started doing a lot of that. So he just pulled himself up by the bootstraps. I hate to be a cliche, but he really, really did. And like I'm so proud of my family, especially because it was really hard for them. Like I can't imagine moving when I'm like 30 years old to a place where I know nothing. And then on my mom's side, she similarly started with some kind of, I think she was like a cleaning lady for a bit and doing things like that. And then eventually she also made her way up. She took some classes, English classes, computer classes while she was here. And then she started working at nonprofits. So she would do
Nice.
like nonprofit operations for a long time in New York.
Very cool. Yeah, my dad's journey is not too dissimilar. I mean, he I think he was like a shoe salesman in college. He went to Fresno State, and he taught himself how to type really quickly in English, and that his initial job outside of Lebanon, they brought him on to do just that because at that company, the person who was responsible for that sort of she became pregnant, and so they had this opening, and that's how he saved up money, and then came here, and eventually he got his degree in civil engineering and became like a home builder. But anyways, I mean, it's just cool to see that upbringing. I think immigrants tend to look at the glass half full, be optimistic, and work
Yeah.
just extremely hard, no excuses, and
Yeah.
it makes more sense now. Your approach to running your startup, and I noticed it just from the first call where I met you, and just seen that carry through from the time we've worked together. So it's really cool. Is Jack's family, your co-founder, immigrants at all, or and how did you meet him? I mean, I've always thought that was an interesting question because YC is like this. I mean, it's a juggernaut. You got like hundreds of companies a year, and like
Yeah.
some of these founders have never even met before they've done it, and they pivot 28 times. So
Yeah.
I'd love to learn about like how you and Jack met, and then maybe we can talk about YC a bit. But yeah, I'll hand it to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jack's family has been here for a long time. They're
Nice.
from Indiana,
Okay.
and I don't know where from that, but I think a lot of people underestimate Jack because he's this like really nice, soft-spoken white guy from Indiana, but he's like a killer. And I don't know really where that comes from him. He would have to probably speak for himself in terms of where that like intense motivation is, but it is pretty crazy in terms of how deep he will go. And the way he works is really different than me as well. He like needs absolute silence and he'll just like lock himself in a dark room and just like tackle a problem for 12 hours straight just like on the computer. I can't do that. I need like a lot of like meetings and to talk to people, and I like kind of like
Want
to
to work,
switch.
talk, and work through things.
Yeah,
more.
exactly. But
Right.
he just kind of like tackles problems. So yeah, he can speak for himself in terms of where that motivation came from. And then in terms of how we met like a while ago, super, super randomly. It was like at a hackathon. But it was just, I was living in Seattle. He was living in Indianapolis at the time. But we happened to both be in Berkeley and just meet. So it was very random mutuals. But we stayed in touch. We had worked on some random side projects together when we both ended up moving to SF. And it was more so like we were really close. And so when I was showing him stuff I was working on when I was still at Microsoft, he basically got really interested in the space with me. I think we started with the conference, and it was just a very natural, oh, okay, let's start building this. We didn't think of it as a company at first. We were kind of like thinking of it as a project almost, and then it
Right.
sort of just evolved on its own.
Very cool. Yeah, and Jack, I agree. I mean, the precision there is impressive. Um, when you both were going through Y Combinator, what impacted you the most? Like, when I've looked at experiences in my life, there's always kind of like it boils down to a few things that I really took from it. There's so many legendary companies that came from the YC platform, and it's just such a great ecosystem to be a part of. Or so like, what really did you take away from it, and maybe any other advice you'd have for founders considering it? Just would love to hear more about your journey there.
Yeah, I think with YC, you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is it's the ecosystem. It's you're surrounded by, first of all the alumni, which are way ahead of in the game as you are. They've been at it for like 10, 15 years. And so you meet all the successful founders, but they tell you about when they started just like you and all the issues they ran into, and all the mistakes they made. And so you feel like, oh, it's not just like the CEO of Airbnb or these different places aren't just these different level people. They're just same as you
Living,
and me.
breathing,
Exactly.
messing up a lot of things and learning.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just feel like it's kind
So
of
it almost humanizes the approach to, like, back to this cup half full, what's the worst case scenario? YC in a lot of ways helps founders just humanize it and say, hey, chill out. It's okay. A lot's going to go wrong. Like Brian at Airbnb, I don't know, their market cap 40, 50 billion.
Yeah.
A lot of things went wrong there, and
yeah.
don't be deterred. It's like humanizing that,
Yeah,
having empathy for it,
exactly. And you also learn about so many people's mistakes so that you don't have to
to
make
repeat them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you also just, I think it's like you're surrounded by other people just kind of like you. And it's like in any other ecosystem, you're not going to really find that, but it just becomes a normal part of you. And it's like you are the 5 closest people in your life in some ways. And so if the 5 closest people in your life are all founders who are top notch and moving quickly and moving faster than you, then you have to move faster and you have to build quicker and you have to put more time and effort. And it just kind of creates its own self-building ecosystem.
Yep. Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I played college football in the past. I didn't play that much, but it was something I tried hard at. And the NFL Combine, they get everybody together, and it's all the top players from each position, and they measure everything. And so there's no hiding. And football's like a team sport, but the Combine on that specific part of this whole thing is an individual measurement. And I feel like startups, Y Combinator, there's like a parallel there of you go into this and you really want to do your best, and you kind of see other people's progress. That brings out a lot of like drive and motivation and focus. And then that, I'm guessing, like the network part of it's pretty insane. Just like, yeah. I'm a solo GP. I came from a non-traditional venture capital background. I'm very fortunate now to have very successful, well-known LPs in my fund, but I built those relationships, earned that trust. It wasn't like I came from an alumni network, and I think that would have been helpful. So it feels like YC really, has that been something you've experienced, like as you've left YC, that being sort of like a really useful network to tap into? Because the one thing I feel like is different about Aravolta than maybe the normal or average YC startup is just the enterprise complexity of your software, that you're building. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, you could correct me, but how's that been for you leaving YC, and just how complex your software is? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so that's true. Like we don't sell to other YC startups.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like that's pretty much what I was saying. Like, you don't get that part of the whole thing there.
Yeah, so while we don't, I think it's more so like there's a lot of companies that do, large enterprise sales, and so they kind of give you a playbook. There's a lot of things that you have internally and access to resources, and then a big component is access to your group partners who've seen a million of these large enterprise deals and can help you if something slows down, or if you don't know what went wrong at XYZ point. They could really, really help you understand kind of what's standard, what do most people do. Like if I never was like running enterprise deals at my previous job. So it's kind of like reading the playbook of a bunch of other founders, and a lot of people would talk about there's kind of this internal knowledge base. And so a lot of people will share their experiences doing different things. And it's kind of a gold mine of information that we have access to. So I think that's one big component. The second is even there's this tool like Happenstance. You can see all your second party, third party connections. Basically, like if I want to talk to this person,
Right.
who in my network across my LinkedIn,
They need that for
Twitter,
venture capital.
yeah, you
Like,
should try the tool.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you get this huge group of people who you're basically one connection away from anyone in the world you almost want to meet. And so you
That
can,
alone is like, you sold me there.
yeah.
You know?
So I think there's a lot of effects from that you could get access to a lot of people you wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Yeah, and then that just makes your journey to getting to where you need to go so much easier, and warm introductions and tapping that is just such a more efficient way to build relationships and do business, basically.
Exactly.
On this note too, like I feel like with investors and founders, there's this constant sort of relationship where, hey, we invested in you, you wanted to get things right. So when things aren't going right, there's like, how much do you share versus not share versus go to advisors or your internal C-suite. Is that dynamic slightly different at YC because they've already kind of funded you? They might lead rounds at seed or A, I'm not sure, but you're not necessarily like looking for them to do anything financially. More, it's just help. Is it a different relationship than maybe if you have a tier one fund who put a check in your seed, you want them to lead your A? You don't want to necessarily go with a list of problems. Like, I could be wrong about this, but it seems like it might be a different relationship on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a couple of things there, which is one, I think investors, like I like to look at them as resources. Like I've probably asked you way for too many stuff and like, can you
I
connect me
love
to
that.
XYZ?
I wish more
But,
founders did that because I want to play that role, but you have to, like, you got to throw me the ball to catch it so I can catch it or vice versa. And so
exactly.
you can only help someone as much as they want to be helped. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like, you are phenomenal at that. Like, and I think that's a great example to other founders. Like, if you want to do this and be the best, you have to go in there and like want everybody's help that you can possibly find and be shameless. Like, hey, I'm here to get things done. Like, can I get XYZ? And I wish more founders did that, honestly. And I do that in the VC world. It's just constantly looking for GPs who raised $100, $200, $300 million funds and like, or LPs. Like, it's just being resourceful so important. But I guess for you is like on the whole question, like the YC relationship, is it slightly, or do you just approach it the same way as like investors? Is it all the same to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another component, which is you have like weekly office hours or biweekly.
So structured.
Exactly. And not just there's one-on-one with your group partners, but then you also have you have like group office hours, which is basically a section that you get really close to throughout the batch. And during those group office hours, basically everyone shares all their problems and what's going
working,
well.
what's not working.
Exactly.
Right.
And it just feels like a very like intimate and open place that you could just share. And so there's no feeling of, oh, like, let's pretend everything's perfect, because obviously it's not.
Right.
You're going to run into tons of different issues and yeah. So I think it feels very open both with the group partners, and that's something I definitely want to start doing with all my investors, basically feeling like the investment is there. It's more so like, how can you help like bring us to kind of the next level? And I don't just see that with YC as being the only investors where I could be open with. I think we were really diligent in who we wanted as investors and kind of the type of people that we wanted to work with, just because we knew you'd be along the journey for the long ride. Yeah, it's going to be a long time to be working together. And so like with that, who are the people that we could kind of be super honest with? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my LPs, I remember we met for a lunch. I think it was our first time meeting, and he's a very successful private equity background. And he kind of said it joking but seriously, and he's like, Sam, most LP GP relationships last longer than the average marriage in America. I'm like, Wow, one, you're right. And two, it's the
Yeah.
same when you invest in a founder. It's like this is a 10-year journey. Sometimes it's like longer. And
Yeah.
so I feel like the core to that is like trust and respect and like transparency.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I love how you're like thinking about that. And I think it's like just good advice. And it's actually similar to being a GP with your LPs. It's about, hey, what's working, what's not, what decisions were made, why were the decisions like trust is, I think, in this AI world where so many things can be made easily, faked easily, whatever, like trust is the currency. It always has been, but like going forward, I think it's even more and more important because people are able to just produce so much more content or insights or whatever it is, do more. Like trust is like really big. So on that note, um, I won't say who your investors are if you want to share that. I mean, I'm an investor, but besides that, I'll leave that to you. But how did you pick your investors? Like, and I mean, it's a really impressive group. So whatever you want to share there, feel free to. And like, what was that process like for you and Jack? And maybe examples of where you declined people. You don't have to say their names, but what was that like? I mean, I don't feel like there's a lot of online talk about that, and I feel like you've done a really good job of that. And I think other founders and listeners, even LPs or funds of funds or investors, would want to hear how to get into what I think was the best YC company of your batch, maybe of this whole year. I is That's hard to do. So
Yeah.
I think you could kind of share some tips there for the listeners.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of different things, which is like, for example, our first meeting, you were like, you had run sales at multiple companies, you had been through enterprise sales, you had closed really big contracts, like you knew what it was and like how to do it. And then also a lot of your companies were extremely related to us and useful for us and potential customers. And so
Right.
for that was like, okay, this is like an obvious person we would love to bring into the cap table. And I think every investor we decided to bring in had something different to offer. Some people, we just really like them as humans, honestly. And we were like,
That
okay,
whole trust thing, right?
yeah,
Like just
exactly.
being a good person and having a good reputation goes a long way. Being
Yeah.
likable.
Another set of our advisors, they're super, super connected in like the whole mining space, which is another side of data centers that we are looking at and think are really interesting, and also are investors into data centers themselves, so the actual operations. And so every person we kind of brought onto the cap table, where we kind of had a vision of how they would play into the company overall. And that's kind of the decision making we had. And obviously we had so much inbound, and like it was pretty difficult to just navigate and have so many
How much,
meetings. And
like, be honest, how much was it, like,
like
inbound wise? Like, I think most investors know this, but when a company is desirable, what
yeah,
it takes to actually get in that investment, and then, to lead around in those investments, what that looks like, I feel fortunate. I don't have to get anyone's approval. I can meet you and say on the spot, yeah, here, I'll write a check today.
yeah,
And so for me, it's like speed and that expertise, like that is what I bring. And it's the network effect of all the other founders I've backed, you getting access to all them. I know what they're doing, what they're not doing, and can give good guidance. And then my own experiences being an operator, scaling a company from seed to Series B, and all those things are great. But for the listeners, like, what was that like, the inbound, and like how, yeah, I mean, I kind of know it, but I don't think most people actually understand what that looks like from an investor or founder point of view.
yeah. I would say we got like probably 3 to 4 emails and like 3 to 4, or like maybe 2 to 3 LinkedIn messages a day for months. Like, so, and that was like, I even like when I had really early on, like I'm quitting Microsoft, starting a company, reach out if like you're working in
And it's just
infrastructure.
boom.
Like that's when it started. And then it just kind of increased in scale once we got into YCN. So yeah, like even in terms of like, who are we actually going to meet with? Do we want to just do like 30-minute meetings with everyone, or do we kind of want to be more selective here?
Which one did you pick? I'm guessing you just said, no, we're going to filter out so
Yeah,
much
we
based on our
filter it out a
criteria.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then go from there.
Yeah, like we didn't want to talk to, for example, like a analyst who reached out from like where we would have to have like 4 meetings with the firm to like talk to like the
Oh my
decision
gosh.
maker.
Right. Right.
So like a lot of that we filtered out, and then So that kind of started, that was helpful. And then filtering based on, we could look at different kind of like reviews of VCs. There was
How'd
an
you look at
internal
that?
platform.
I'm curious. What
YC has a way to do
YC?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there
So
anything about Bannon in there?
we could talk about it off the podcast, but we're leaving a 5-star review.
Okay,
so.
there we go. All right.
Yeah. So then, yeah, we could look at reviews of investors, and that was a big filter.
Learning so
as
much
well.
today.
Yeah. And then, yeah, lots of different things there. So I
Okay.
think that was the main thing we filtered on based on what other people said. And then, yeah, basically, can we get to the decision maker quickly?
Because like a pre-seed, like you're just running on such limited time, and
Yeah.
and it's like I don't know, can't comment on other fund structure, but like that was one of my frustrations and why I wanted to start a fund was I just saw like the founders I had worked with when I was head of sales, like how much time they wasted educating a general partner so the general partner can then go educate
Yeah.
the 5 other dudes who don't even know anything about AI, and then they just come back with more. It's like this never ending time suck, and that's the
Exactly.
majority of funds. They're not born in the AI native world. You know, the most funds today, they do build, some build, like Andreessen does a great job. They have an expert team doing AI infra and AI, and I think they have a really proven model to build like a 40-50 billion dollar AUM with expert teams in each kind of defense, crypto, but a lot of funds don't do that. They're like trying to do defense, crypto, green tech. I'm like, how the fuck, like that's such a bad founder experience. Like to me, there should be this like really clear what is needed to make the decision, how long will it take, and like pre-seed you're already just running on such limited time. And that was part of the reason I started Banyan and a huge kind of value prop to the LPs and to founder. Like, I'll make a decision quickly. I've seen AI applied at Uber, at Tesla, at Cruise, all these different people I've worked with, have real relationships with that I can contact, and that I've literally helped them establish their experiment and model management kind of software stack internally. So like that's the insights I'm relying on, and you just gotta like make that decision. But do you feel like in the future, say in like 10 or 20 years, how do you think venture capital will be rearranged? Do you think we'll see a lot more like specialist funds, or do you think the mega funds will like continue to thrive, like the Sequoias and Dreessens? Like, I don't know. I'm just curious from a YC founder point of view, and just what you think about that.
I think maybe like the top of the line, like the Sequoia and Dreessens
They
have a
survive.
big, yeah, they kind of have a big advantage there. But then those like mid tier where you still have to talk to a lot of people and then are using the older model, I think it's
These generalist investors, they're just somehow doing it all
Yeah.
like at once.
And it's hard when you're a founder because if you're spending all your time raising, like when are you actually building a company? And so it's like
Same being, by the way, a GP. Like
Yeah.
every hour I spend fundraising, I can't spend helping you, and I can't spend trying to find the next Aravolta in a different space.
Yeah, that's like exactly it. And so you really need a time box, or that was the decision we made. Like, okay, let's just time box. We're gonna do like funding in this period of time. Even then, like let's still have a portion of the day to like work on the company. Let's time box like all the talks within a week, and then kind of like the closing and negotiation, all that stuff can like happen in the next couple of weeks. And I think that way you really have control over the whole process. Otherwise, you're just in these
You're at
constant
the whims of
loops
like,
yeah.
like whatever the person's mood is at the time.
Exactly.
Like if they're feeling optimistic, it moves quick. If they're whatever skeptical, so you just time box it and pick the investors who can match that, and then people who have a network and judgment that can help you, and everything else just gets put to the side.
Yeah, exactly.
How does that change for Series A? Because, you know, Series A is more money, probably a board role, probably like pretty custom terms that a, maybe not, maybe it could be a safe. I mean, it doesn't have to be a price round, but how do you think that changes for you? And it's okay if you want to say, we're not sure, we don't want to talk about that too much, but not to put you on the spot, but like, how does that change, you think, as you go to raise bigger rounds, sort of that dynamic from a founder fundraising point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still in some ways the same thing, which is even though you're raising a Series A, like you don't want that to be a 2 month process. Like the
Right.
company still needs your time and lots of attention. And so if the company is suffering because of your Series A, you've made a mistake,
I
in
love
my
that.
opinion.
Yeah.
So that's like, so I think that kind of same logic applies. Obviously, at that point, there's a lot more legal complexity, especially a price round, and there's a lot more.
Terms that could really change your future.
Yeah.
Run those by me when you do that, because like I've
Yeah.
seen some, wow, there's a lot out there in those terms. And I mean, usually it's founder friendly, but they, it could sometimes unfortunately not be founder friendly when it comes to price round terms.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is you don't want to be in a position where you're kind of like you want to be in the position where you can easily say no to anything
You
that
want to be
doesn't
Zuck.
work. Exactly.
Zuck is running like I don't know, their market cap 40. No, what is? Do you know what Meta's market cap is? Like 400 billion trillion. I don't know. It's in the hundreds of billions, and he still runs it like a 3-person startup that's bootstrapped.
Yeah,
That's who
exactly.
you want to be, Zuck. You don't
Yeah.
want to be, hey, I need your approval to hire this VP of engineering. Hey, I need your approval to fire this person. I mean, I've seen stuff
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
That's painful. Like it just slows things down and
right. And I
yeah.
mean, in the US, we have safes and we have a culture of let the founder be the founder. I think
Yeah.
that, as my firm transitions to Fund 2 and leading more rounds, that will always be my thing. Let the founder be the founder. The founders should run companies all the way until the company doesn't exist. I think that nobody knows how to get things done like the founder. Nobody understands the lineage of decisions like the founder. And like, Peter Thiel talks about that non-founder run companies often perform worse. They don't innovate quick enough. And at any given time, there's like 10 things that could kill your company. The founder will always be the one who could make that. And it's like, I think VCs get that wrong, and Vinod Koshla talks about that. Like 90% of VCs add negative value. They literally like mess up your decision making because they're like getting in your ear about things and asking for insights or data, and it's just slowing you down. So I definitely think these are all the things that I've tried to use as first principles when working with folks like you, and I want to keep building on. But that makes sense about the Series A. Just you're gonna time box it. Same kind of philosophy there, and put the company first, so you don't slow things down too much.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the biggest thing is making sure you're raising when it's like a good time for the company, and then when there's a lot of headwinds kind of, and not when suddenly you're desperate for cash.
Right.
So that's kind of, I think, how we want to go into it.
Yeah, I mean, so much of raising money is like psychological and leverage based, and this whole like fear of missing out is kind of like
FOMO,
talked about a lot. I'm curious your thoughts. I think it's like it's just about value. Like if you do this, there is an inherent upside value.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but how much do you think about macro versus that whole equation?
Well, any like business, I think like deal or sale or anything, it's all just humans making decisions, and
Right.
humans kind of have different like emotions and needs that you have to work with. So I think that's one component, but then the other component is just an equation of, okay, if we close XYZ and then we get this customers and we grow the company this much, how much can we make in profit? And does that make sense for you as an investor
Right.
in terms of like where the cap is and different things? So yeah, I think it's just kind of balancing kind of, the, I don't know, the FOMO, but also is the company really, really strong? And I think that core principle of just focusing on the company, it kind of just brings what you need, not focusing on like, how do we create FOMO or how do we do XYZ? It's just focusing on the company.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about Adam Newman, and some say he's like the best. He's Israeli. I think he's Jewish. I love him personally. I lived in Israel. I'm a big fan of the Israeli culture and everything. So, but I mean, some people say he's like the king of fundraising. Like, and I think that there's a lot to learn there. Like, how do you get into a fundraise and get out and have options and do it on your terms? I mean, is it part of like if you went on a piece of paper and wrote the 6 most important things of being a CEO, I'd argue like fundraising is like very high up there, because if you run out of money, you're done. And most startups can't just do what they need to do without fundraising. It's still like the world we live in.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess in terms of the question there, I mean, like fundraising was, like I said, it kind of just was brought on by focusing on the company. Like we
Right.
started with building a product, and we started by trying to get our first sale, and
Pick the
then
right problem.
exactly.
95% told you we need this, we're open to it. I mean, that alone is, do you feel like that's like the most important thing when you're getting going, is like picking the right thing to, because you've been through YC. I mean, I've heard stories about, I've met a lot of YC founders, like and it's not just a YC thing, just in general, the amount of pivots that can happen, even investments I've made that didn't go the right way, how I had planned. Luckily, it's been very few, but it's happened. Like, what do you think is the key there? Is it picking the right thing? Is it picking something you love? Is it solving a big enough problem? Is it market timing? I mean, it's an arbitrary question, but what do you think you could get right or wrong there pretty easily?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have the magic equation for how
Yeah,
to
I
build
mean, you
the
got it right
perfect.
for Aravolta at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's like there's a lot of you have to be really humble in terms of like, oh, like I know this is going to be the best thing in the world, like I have to build it. And then even when you get like initial traction or anything initial, it's like, can you maintain and continue to have make actual like physical money, like revenue? I think is kind of just, it speaks for itself. And I think yeah, you could just pivot a million times, but to build something people want, it takes time. Like you have to iterate and you have to deploy something and have someone say, oh, this is almost there, but we need X, Y, Z. So I think it's one, really just listening, not speaking too much, and like listening to what people are really telling you, and kind of what's below what they're telling you. Okay, we're saying, you know, we can't really change products, but we really dislike our existing software system. We honestly haven't even been able to get 30% of our hardware onto that system. Okay, what they're telling you is if there was something in the market that could do that, they would switch in an instant. They just don't believe that there's something in the market. So I think one thing is listening to what people are saying, and then two is just iterating on your initial thesis, and getting to kind of a point where people are saying hell yes to whatever you're selling. And I think, like I said, you could pivot before you get there, but a lot of the time you just needed to iterate more to get to that product market fit. So I think there's a lot of components there. So we've tried to do the best we can in terms of listening to our customers, iterating on the product, continuing to build, and just focusing on that component.
got it. No, that makes sense, and it reminds me of just touching on a few things you said. It's um, back in my operating days, an individual I worked with, he had built some pretty large teams. Like I think at the one point he had managed people in the thousands, and he talked about to the organization like this concept of you need this extreme belief in what you're doing, but at the same time just be willing to change your mind and change your thinking. And it's like I think that can be hard because you're so, not you, but like in just as you're a founder or builder, you're believing in what you're doing, but you have to be willing to like listen and change your mind.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not an expert on Steve Jobs, but I've heard him say things around people not knowing what they want.
Yeah.
So how do you like strike that balance of I believe in what I'm doing, I'm willing to change my mind, I'm gonna listen, but people might not know what they want? Is it because they don't know what exists, to your point, or do you think there's something else going on there when you're building product?
Yeah, I mean, people just know what they've been exposed to. So if to them a standard deployment is like, you know, a 1 year timeline with having to bring in an engineering team on your end, like that's just how it runs. And that's how in the past, that's what they
Status
know.
quo.
Exactly.
Right.
And so if you could change things to like, not just like a, you know, a 10% improvement, a 15% improvement, when you see a 90% improvement, that's when people didn't really picture what that would look like. And they didn't really like know to ask for that. So I think on that end, you just have to really like just have the belief that you will bring that
Get
90%
that like
improvement.
10x
Exactly.
improvement, not 10%, 10x, like
Yeah.
1,000 times better
Exactly.
than the existing way of the world at that time. You have to be able to see that and then build it and
Exactly.
like adjust it and then have the conviction to do that, even though status quo might say it's literally impossible, you're wasting your time.
Yeah,
And
and
you're
like
just
a lot of
getting
people will
rejected.
say, Yeah. But also I think there's a lot of noise, especially when you're building a company. There's like so many opportunities and so many people have different opinions on so much stuff around the
Just getting pulled
product,
everywhere.
sales. Yeah, there's just like a lot of noise. And I think being really structured in your thesis and then what noise matters, because some does. Some customer feedback matters. Certain people who have been building data centers for 30 years, their thoughts matter, but really cutting through everything else
It doesn't matter.
into, yeah,
It's like when you get feedback that challenges your understanding or threatens your understanding or your mission, do you take it in and adjust, or do you ignore? Like, that's the key. That's like, to me, the judgment that's required to advance to that 10x multiple
yeah,
of value
exactly.
creation.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, there's two things we've sort of touched on. I'll touch on the first one. So this concept of in the AI native world, and I've definitely seen this. I mean, at some point I'm going to release a data report on it. It's probably in the future. It's not now, but in the AI native world, revenue per employee is astronomically higher than the software world of the past. The growth rate, the top line revenue growth rate, is also astronomically higher. I think Olivia Moore and Andreessen Horowitz released a report, something like for B2B enterprise, 6 months into selling. And this is selling. So it's not like into your company's history. It's like from when you said, okay, the product's ready, I'm going to sell it, 6 months in, the top quartile. And they don't define top quartile. They don't say if it's top 1% or 5 or 10. But the point is, like, they say top quartile now in the AI native enterprise world, which you are in. 6 months in, you're around at like 2.3 million in revenue. And 12 months in, you're at, I think, like top quartiles, 5 million in revenue. And on average, it takes like 6 or 7 months into selling to raise a Series A. And you're only raising on average top quartile $2 or $3 million before the Series A. So just on like unpacking this paradigm shift in the AI native world, just for enterprise, because you're an enterprise founder, is like, me as a VC and Andreessen and I think a lot of others who have adjusted to this, is like, we're looking for companies 6 months into selling at 2 million in revenue, 1 year into selling at 5 million in revenue. And to your point, exactly what you've done in Aravolta, you're like 3 people. So you've raised maybe a couple million before you're going to go gear, because you're not raising anymore. I
Yeah.
don't believe you will. You don't need to
Yeah.
before your Series A. So you, in my view, check every box, and I won't disclose any confidential information, but I mean, how do you see that kind of changing? Like, do you think, like, if you're not in that bucket now, you can't fundraise? Like, do you think for those median or lower tier enterprise AI native companies, like, they just kind of miss out because the data is showing also, like, in total, there's less rounds. So less people are getting a shot on goal at pre-seed, and the bar is so much higher. And I've been trying to explain this to founders: don't go raise at pre-seed till you have traction. But curious your view, like, was that talked about a lot at YC? Beyond that initial YC check you get the traction first, or how did you see that? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I think the round dynamics and like how people raise is really different for every company, and it's kind of like making a company is a journey. So in terms of like where we were even like 6 months ago or 1 year ago, it looks really, really different, even like on a month by month basis. And I think, yeah, because of the AI native world and how companies, they have access to markets or people who want to deploy capital to make things significantly more efficient. And there's kind of like grabbing that market share. And I think people who are able to do that build and expand really quickly.
Like founders selling to the, like you're saying, the appetite is so
Exactly.
big.
The appetite is there.
That is why this growth is in 1 year you're at 5 million in ARR. Like, I come from like AI infrastructure, ML ops before the AI native fund and Banyan. But I mean, if you could get to 1 million in revenue in 2 years of selling, you were like top, you were like the talk of the town back then. Now that's like kind of like, that would be like, you're mediocre. So like, and you're saying that's really coming from the appetite of the customer. It has to be, right? They're
Exactly.
the ones paying for this stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, there's another component, which is like Figma didn't even like start making money until what, 5 years in, and
Or
they've tried to,
UiPath, there's so many examples.
yeah,
But do we live in that world? That's what I was asking. Like, can there still be startups that took 5 years of R&D? Obviously, investments we have, like I think the top one, like in terms of patent number, that's the metric, is 50-ish patents.
mm,
That company needed a lot of money and time to get to that level of R&D, and physical infrastructure historically is hundreds of millions of dollars. To do an ASIC chip tape out is at least 6 years and 40 to 100 employees, maybe more. That being said, companies like Positron are changing that entire narrative. Like they're
mm.
getting, some are skipping ASIC chip design, or they're at least getting it done in record time with even less financing, and they're getting to significant revenue. So even there, that paradigm's changing. But I guess my question to you is, do you think we'll see generational companies that took multiple years to get going and selling, or is that kind of going to be a thing of the past, except for really R&D heavy, patent heavy companies?
I think another component is it's so much easier to build. Like when we have a problem where like, how do we fix this? You just talk to GPT for a couple hours and keep asking deeper and deeper questions and go really deep into a subject matter. And it would be impossible to gain all that knowledge so quickly.
Prior
In
to
the
this.
past, it would take months of kind of testing and kind of different approaches. And so I think first of all, knowledge that employees have and are able to work. Like basically, I think all of our employees are like 20x because they use AI in their day to day.
20x
Yeah,
than
because
what they would have been pre-GPT release.
exactly, in terms of
Isn't
just
that
their
crazy?
efficiency. And so you can move and operate a lot faster. But I do think in order to build a product that people really want and to get product market fit and to scale quickly, it does take time.
It
Like
takes time.
it takes
Especially for like what you build. Like we talked about it, right? These
yeah,
low-level integrations, nothing's the same even on an account basis. Each data center is different. There's so many generations of hardware.
exactly.
So that takes time.
Exactly. And it takes time to kind of build a product that doesn't, we don't have to manually onboard every customer
Time to
once
value,
at a
right?
time.
Right.
Exactly. So I think certain things take time and certain things are 20x faster. And it's kind of like putting your artisan touch on a product. It's like really caring about those small details, the performance and making sure everything's fast, but also the actual like cutting down all the stuff you don't need in the product because XYZ said it would be really nice to have this thing and really cutting it down into what is that core problem statement that your customer has and how do I fix it? And so cutting your product into a set of features that work really, really, really well.
MVP.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
And having those be deployable in data
Easy to
centers,
use, low time to value.
yeah,
Right.
and then especially with data centers, you have a lot of, basically you need to be SOC 2 compliant and get a lot of compliance and security and those type of things. And that also takes time to make
Yeah,
sure
like
you're meeting all the
Vanta, I
standards.
think can only do SOC 2. I don't know. Last I had done it on, like, been involved, it was like still 6 months usually, soup to nuts.
Well, Delve, you can get it, I think, in like a couple months. But then
Okay,
your
so
type 2,
I'm
you
already
need like an
outdated on. Oh yeah, like
yeah.
how about SOC 2 type 2? Is that still a couple
You
months?
still have an observation period, so that takes a couple months. But the actual like type 1 is much faster now.
Okay, well that's good to know. So in summary though, it sounds like you're leaning towards it still takes time. There's an artisan touch. There could be companies that took longer than this top quartile, 6 months, 2 million, 1 year, 5 million in enterprise AI native software. There still could be decacorns that didn't meet that mold, but you would argue on the aggregate, you're around 20x more kind of efficient, and it allows you to get to an MVP faster.
Exactly.
And so that should significantly tilt the scales. And on top of all that, the appetite is so large. If you're building something in the right arena, which you are, that really helps too. So it's like all these variables. You'd almost say in most scenarios that data from A16Z looks correct to you.
Yeah, and I think another component is like, yeah, you could scale up your revenue really fast, but does it churn? Like we've seen like
That's
these,
true, right? From application companies,
yeah,
especially consumer,
and like
right?
these AI SDRs, like it sounds amazing to have
Yeah, I
a
haven't
rep,
invested in
but
that,
like,
right?
yeah, but you know, if it doesn't work right and the customer doesn't love it, they're gone, and that revenue just quickly dissipates. So it's how do you have something that's actually sticky?
Staying power.
Exactly.
Like, so for me, what I look at, I have 5 or 6 investments in AI native vertical software. I look at how deep is the workflow ownership of this AI native startup. Like, I have an investment in Finalis, the fastest growing investment bank in history.
Oh, cool.
I mean, they're keeping the investment bank compliant, so they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Once or Lexroom AI, I think it's probably the fastest growing software company right now out of Italy, but I believe at past 1,000 paying customers. They've grown revenue like at the top 1% decile since we invested in. They provide a legal research platform that's completely custom to Italian case law, which is complex and hard to understand. So if you're a lawyer, that's 30% of your time. Once you start using that and it's very high accuracy, like the churn's been very low there. Wand AI is another example. They're working with like Presight out of the Middle East they have like on a lot of large deals, it's like a Copilot. So for, Franklin Templeton or customers like this are going in there to do their knowledge worker work, but it remembers everything and it's compliant because GPT has like data sensitivity issues, and they've had memory installed in their offering for the last 2 years. So basically, I look at how serious is that workflow ownership. Is there a network effect as you get more data? Do you offer more accurate offering? And I think the shift we're going to see is what starts as vertical becomes horizontal and becomes a system of record, a system of working. In your case, you're the system of intelligence and operations for the data center. Maybe your case is a bit different than like the traditional vertical software application companies, but you're still moving to like that operating system. You kind of wear that from the jump, but that's kind of what I've seen to avoid this whole churn thing of like the AI SDR is like a great example. It's easy come, easy go.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Another question for you too is like, um, I guess when you go out and you fundraise, and I'm gonna pull up my notes on this. When you're talking to investors, like, is there any kind of like features or future facing um, visions that you and Jack have that you're really excited about? I mean, I think I kind of asked it earlier, but is there anything bigger than what you're doing now that is like really exciting to you? Like maybe the technology's not there yet, the AI capabilities aren't there yet. Is there anything like that you've been thinking about?
Well, a huge component is kind of that data model. Like I said, like every customer now has on a per second basis, like data from every
Coming
single
from their
device.
systems,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And they have years of that data once they
It's
use their
stored
product.
somewhere.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's all stored. And so that's kind of a gold mine for these companies and for us. And because they have so much data, eventually our goal is to get to the autonomous data center, or where you don't say, oh, operator, like do XYZ and you'll save this much, or
So it
the
is kind of
system
like
itself can
AGI
just
for
do
the
it.
data center.
Exactly.
Your Copilot would complete actions autonomously 24/7
Yeah.
based on a fine-tuned agent that's deployed on that data center instance using historical data. It's just not all the way there yet to start making decisions on that scale.
Yeah, right now it still is kind of, there's a human in the loop. The human says, okay, does this make sense? Like they triple check everything, and then they deploy the recommendation. Eventually you potentially don't even need that component. So I think it starts with the data layer. You can't just jump or skip all that
Yeah, like the
steps.
model can't make decisions until it's been trained on enough scenarios
Exactly.
to have. And I mean, I don't even know if there is room for error in this. If you're autonomously making, you'd
No,
almost need
there's no room for
100%.
error. Yeah.
And I don't even know if any AI is at that level yet. Even Waymo, back to that, like maybe it is. I don't know. I'd have to check, but it seems pretty low likelihood that something's at 100% accuracy in AI.
Exactly.
That's AGI to me.
Like 90% isn't good enough, basically.
No.
It's like you need all those edge cases to be accounted for, and that takes a lot of data input. And basically seeing what those edge cases could be.
Yeah. Do you think you're like 2 years away from that? 3 years? Is it hard to know?
It's hard to know. I also think the future of the data center itself looks really different. Like Stargate, they're doing like 4.5 gigawatts of capacity. Like we haven't seen anything like that before. But then there could also be completely different data centers that are much smaller than what we soon to deploy and work on completely different energy types. And then separated grid, like separated from the grid, fully autonomous data centers. Like there's so much coming to the market. And I think we're just going to be moving with our customers and seeing what's out there and just building the foundational layer of those operations that applies to any type of data center in the future.
Yep. Like listening and building, being agile and, building on this already very strong foundation.
Yeah.
Question 2 for you is, I've seen all different perspectives on this and I have my own, I guess, hypothesis about it, but do you think we're in a overbuild out? Like, do you think it was like a Zuck said, hey, let's buy as many GPUs as we can. And then we have Elon down in Texas just going absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this graph, like he built this latest data center faster than the average American homes built. Yeah. So, you have bigger deployments being built faster than ever and at larger scale. And then a lot of critics like on Wall Street or other arenas that maybe aren't at the front lines of this. Well, they aren't. They're maybe missing the context. I mean, what's your view? Do you think there could be an overbuild of infrastructure, or do you think it's still like an underbuild situation due to like supply chain constraints? Like NVIDIA can only produce so many chips at a time. So, I mean, I'm curious your view on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts here, but in some ways, like the US used to be the manufacturing hub of the world, and then that shifted. But I think there's a lot of, like, can we bring manufacturing back to the US? And I think manufacturing intelligence is actually much more interesting than manufacturing clothes or toys or other things. And we literally have the capability here to manufacture intelligence, which is something that can be applied to all the basic work that's done, all the documentation and writing things and kind of putting together different data points and writing Excel sheets and making PowerPoints. All of this kind of intelligence layer can be built out, and they're trained in these centralized facilities, at least right now. And if that continues to be the case, then the demand for making more and more intelligent things will only increase, because there's no reason to say, we're good, that's good enough. So I think if data centers remain in the kind of similar model, I think it's honestly probably we're just going to continue to build up.
So you're thinking, hey, intelligence is AI driven intelligence is such a supreme value add to the world. At the minimum, we keep the pace of the infrastructure build out, and now we have policy actually looking to increase the appetite, increase the R&D, increase the at-home U.S. built infra. So all these things are kind of pushing forward, but the main driver is just the value add of the intelligence being created. You don't view it as an overbuild whatsoever. You at the minimum think we stay at this pace of build out.
I mean, how much value has OpenAI or Anthropic added to your life on the day-to-day? For me, at least, it's like there's a huge amount of value in terms of how much I can produce from the world because of these foundational
like you said, a
companies.
20x increase
exactly
in your
every
people's work.
Yeah.
In yours.
Minimum, yeah.
20x. I mean, that. But then there's, devil's advocate, there's like critics that say like, okay, yeah, like they're trying to do this, like, I don't even know the numbers. Like I think it was $30 billion a year they're going to pay Oracle, but they only produce 2 or 3 billion. So like, what do you say to those critics that are like, hey, we're just looking at this, like this company is going to go bankrupt at their current spend.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of that is what it takes to get to AGI, like, or supreme intelligence, or be the intelligence leader. It just takes such a capital intensive effort. I mean, that was like another thing I wanted to ask you is like this talent war. Like, how are you competing to hire talent? I know you're building out engineering with like $100 million offers now. But I mean, it's kind of 2 questions in one is like, do you think the critics are right about the overbuild, overspend, and then talent wars? And then we could probably wrap up, but like, how are you kind of thinking about both those things?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously not giving out $100 million
Great, not
offers.
yet.
Uh,
If
yeah,
you do, I'll join.
yeah. But I think people just want to be part of something, like and part of
Mission.
something. Yeah, exactly. I think money, like once you get to a certain amount, like it's all the same after that in terms of your happiness level. I think people want to be part of something, something that's growing, something that's exciting, a great environment.
It's like flat autonomy to build and make an impact and drive
Exactly.
the decisions of this company. I mean, at Meta, I mean,
Yeah.
Zuck's great. I love Meta. I'm pro Meta. I own a lot of Meta shares, but like, I still
Yeah.
think you're not going to get that at a huge company.
Yeah,
So for
exactly.
you, and like I was talking to a friend of mine, she's a reporter at Forbes last week, and that was a similar answer I gave her was just like the autonomy and the flatness of the decision making and the impact. And for you, it's like mission when is that like kind of the big, I mean, are you seeing it in candidates like want way more money now, or is it like not kind of like that unless you're like the author of original authors of GPT or something? Is it isolated? Because even in the media and a lot of VCs, a lot of people are wondering that. I'm curious what you're seeing on the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's also very much dependent. If you're hiring AI researchers, it looks very different than hiring like forward deployed engineers that are customer facing.
Right.
I think in terms of like how we hire, it's really just like this is a team that we're interacting on the day to day, and this is what you're going to own. And engineers love really, really hard, interesting challenges.
Harder the better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Where they could own basically a completely new way of doing things. And so if you could offer them that gives a big advantage, I
Right.
think. So I think having a really interesting product stack and product to work on and something completely different and a really difficult challenge, I think is always exciting for engineers.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's kind of on the front lines outside of the researcher role. It's not really changing the discussions too much. And maybe even in the researcher roles, there's so few candidates that could demand that premium. It's just kind of not overhyped, like it's a real thing, but it's not really changing too much on the recruiting side.
Yeah, I mean, like recruiting is a huge challenge, and yeah, we're hiring
Right.
software
Yeah,
engineers.
there you go. Yep.
So if anyone's watching this, but yeah, I think the challenge is more so finding that right fit for the company,
Right.
the person who is gonna go, put everything into a really hard challenge and is willing to go really, really deep into a specific problem. That's kind of more of the challenge is finding those right fits.
Yeah, makes sense. And on this whole, and then we can wrap up the people saying, "Hey, we're overbuilding. The revenue numbers don't make sense. OpenAI spending way too much versus what they're producing in revenue." Like Anthropic is now raising from the Middle East, which was something they said they never would do, but they're saying now we have to sort of be able to build the business we want to. So you're seeing even there, like them changing their own stance that they self-inflicted to have a chance at being number one. So do you think those critics have warranted claims, or I mean, how do you view that, like over spending versus revenue ratio at such a big scale? Like, how does that all shake out? Because even I think SoftBank's investments like faltering a bit and into OpenAI. So I'm just curious, like your lens on that, and happy to wrap up.
Yeah. In terms of the actual build, like the answer is I don't know in terms of like what the future looks like 5 years from now. Honestly, even 1 or 2 years from now. But I do think if you could bring a certain amount of value into the world, once you actually deploy or like basically
Release the
finance that
intelligence,
value,
right?
that is going to be,
Orders of
someone's going to
magnitude
make
bigger than
a
that
lot of
20
money.
billion you've burnt on GPUs that year.
Yeah, exactly. So if that actually works out and we can build something that provides that level of value to the world, then I think they're gonna be very, very happy. And I personally wouldn't be betting against OpenAI.
No.
Having like seen talks from Sam and kind of what they're working on, I wouldn't be betting against them.
Yeah, and I mean, we could wrap up, but like on my side, like I feel like the biggest regret I'll have in 10 years could be twofold. One, it's not about the entry price on pre-seed versus seed. I'm flexible on terms because to me, it's like when I look back in the next 10 years, did I at least get into some of the most important companies of our generation? So that could be a regret if I don't happen to do that. And then the other regret, I think, is not having deployed enough capital into the winners we already have back. Because I've looked back, our investments have done, I think, almost $500 million in bookings from pre-seed and seed. And there's already ones where I'm like, I wish even my own capital I had put more in there.
Yeah.
So it's like, to the OpenAI point, yeah, I wouldn't bet against them. And I completely agree. Like, that capital is almost peanuts compared to the value for society coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sweet. Well, Margarita, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much.